We'll go ahead and get started. Spokefly will be speaking first. Where are they at? Right. So, do you have you don't have a, what's that? You don't have a presentation now. Okay, cool.
What's the hashtag tonight?
ATX Transport, is that right?
Transport ATX.
Transport ATX. Thanks.
Hey everybody, how's it going? You ready to talk about bikes? So I'm Nate, I'm the founder of Spokefly. My co-founder Dan is in the there he is, there's Dan. And what we do is we make it easy to ride bikes. We're a peer-to-peer bike rental service, and you can rent bikes on demand just using your smartphone. I'm going to demo it for you real quick. So you can see this pretty fly bike behind me. This is Pony Express. I think the bike owner's name is Tom, and he's got a couple of bikes on our system. Let's see. All right, so can everybody see this? So this is our app. Once you find a bike to ride, it shows you directions to the bike. I put this one far away. It's clearly right here, so you can kind of see how that works. When I'm ready to start my ride, I literally just walk up to the bike. There's a combination U-lock on it. Click Start My Ride. Stop tweeting at me while I'm talking. And so this is the combination to this bike. Don't steal this bike, I'm going to change it later. And so I can ride it anywhere, and unlike a traditional bike rental where maybe I'm going to a shop and I have to pick up the bike there and drop it off at the same location, I can pick up and ride this bike anywhere, drop it off using my smartphone, and then when I'm ready to end my ride, I just say where I'm dropping off the bike. So we're here at Capital Factory. Confirm that it's locked up, and it's using the location on my phone to check the bike back in. And so another member can then come and ride it afterwards. And so this is kind of in between a pure bike rental and a bike share. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to ride bikes, but when we thought about riding bikes, we thought the process for renting a bike at a bike shop is less than ideal, and the process of using a bike share is less than ideal. I want to use a bike on demand right away. I want to have a wide variety, and I don't want to pay $40, $50, $60 a day to rent a bike. So the maximum per day charge for us is $10, and it's 15 cents a minute. So most rides are between $2 to $3, and if you want to keep the bike the whole day, it's only $10. Yeah, so the owners get paid based on how much their bike is used each month. We offer subscription plans for heavy riders, so it's kind of a somewhat complicated formula, but basically we take all the revenue, divide up how much your bike is used, and then that's how much that owner gets paid. Does the owner have access to the bike at all times? They can take it offline whenever they want. Since the bikes are kind of out there in the world, this is typically an idle bike, or a bike that you're just not using at all, whether it's extra or not.
Two questions. One, so are you more like the cargo floating model or the Zipcar pod model? And two, how long before your API is at such a point that aggregators can pull that information?
Well, we did see the other day that there was this company called Ride Scout that had us listed. Our API is in pretty good shape, actually. You can talk with Dan about that later. And it's definitely more the cargo model, because you can pick up and drop off anywhere. You just lock it up to a standard bike rack and you're good to go.
I think we're sort of listed more than three. Yep.
So is there a bike inspection for safety as it comes online, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we check all the bikes when we list them, make sure they're kind of up to our quality standards. One of us is going to ride the bike before anybody else does. There's locks, lock lights. Some of the bikes we're going to put baskets on. So different kind of features for different bike owners.
And then do you cover the cost of like making sure they have lights on them, that sort of thing, or is that something you require?
Lights, locks, and basket we're going to cover the costs of. We also cover the bike up to 5K in theft and damage. So if your bike is stolen, we cover that too.
You guys have a full
area like Cargo is? Do you have a home area as well like Cargo?
Right now, just downtown campus area, Austin, it's not super restrictive. As we expand to other cities, those areas are going to be more defined, like Cargo. But you're also not going to ride a bike to San Antonio, probably. So it's kind of less of a problem.
Being that you're in the bike business, tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the safest, how do you feel that safety ranks in cycling downtown? Do you think that most people feel that it's safe? If it's not safe, what do you think that people need to encourage more cycling,
Well, I think
other than nice weather?
Sure. I think that there have been numerous studies that have shown better cycling infrastructure is kind of the number one thing that's going to make that better and increase the cycling as a percent of mode of transportation. But the other thing, specifically to Austin, the data says that downtown's one of the most dangerous places to cycle. It's where most of the accidents are going to occur. I think there was an MIT map that just came out that highlighted all the hot spots of where accidents happen for bikes. So I would generally say that most people that currently ride are taking their lives into their own hands kind of as a whole, and more people would cycle if infrastructure was better. I think I just read an article maybe in the Statesman about the proposed bicycle master plan. And I think the survey that they did said that 55% of people would ride their bike for transportation if the infrastructure was available, which I thought was interesting. Any other questions? Take a sticker if you run out. We have more, literally thousands of them. If you have any other questions, feel free to grab me or Dan. Thanks.
Next up is Carma. Just a recap of what happened at the last meeting. This is the second meeting, by the way. Last time we had Key to the Street, Ride Scout, and Awesome B-Cycle speak, just as these guys are. So, do you have any ideas for topics for discussion? Hit me up or Nicole, and we'll try to get those in for subsequent meetings.
Do you have that adapter for your phone?
I do. Yeah, I'm going to use it in a second.
Thank you very much for joining me today. My name is Russ Garcia with Carma. Did you know that 900,000 empty seats clog Austin's roads every day? By 2035, it's going to take 3 hours to get from Round Rock to downtown, unless we change the way we move. Tonight, my goal is to convince you to get in the car with somebody you've never met before. I want to show you that for the very first, or that like never before, there's a safe way to do this. What's more than that, I want you to want to get in the car with somebody you've never met before every single day. Now, why would you ever want to do that? I'll tell you in a second, but first, the rise of the sharing economy with companies like Airbnb and Couchsurfing, and with our friends at Uber and Lyft changing the way we think of taxis and other ride-for-hire services, and with Ride Scout bringing all these options together in one place. The doors of our homes and our cars are open to each other like they've never been open before. You can tweet that, #TransitATX. Again, the doors of our homes and our cars are open to each other like they've never been open before. Carma exists because the next step in this evolution is going to change the way Austin gets to work every day. To share a quote by some of our heroes, I cite Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb. He says, as big as Uber and Lyft are, there are going to be companies that will be as big or bigger that will also disintermediate the public bus system. Now here at last month's transportation meetup here at the Capitol Factory, Joseph Kopser, CEO of Ride Scout, said, carpooling will take off. Carma is doing great things right here in Austin. We are Carma. We are the world's first true ride-sharing network. We connect users with other users based on their route and time of day. Our users are people just like you that are already headed from their origin to their destination. They're just picking up a few people along the way to share that journey. Carma allows them to, facilitates the awareness of these trips and gives them the platform to communicate with each other. Carma actually gets cars off the road by sharing commutes. Drivers get paid by passengers, and passengers make it to their destination without having to drive. We believe that the world is ready to change the way we think about private transportation by sharing our morning and afternoon commutes. Now, how does Carma fit in the mix of other transportation startups? Carma excels at getting you to and from work the cheapest and fastest way possible through our network of carpoolers. We see ourselves as an integral part in the paradigm shift in the way we think about shared transportation. Carma is a piece of this overall paradigm shift in private transportation. Now, personally, as an avid couch surfer through South America and continuing to host people here in Austin, I know that there is a safe way to invite people to share your most intimate spaces, your home and your car. Carma and its community keep each other safe through a similar system as Airbnb and couch surfing. Each user after every trip has a chance to leave a 1 to 5-star rating based on their experience. We take these ratings very seriously as they are the safeguard that keeps our community safe, and we won't allow any users to continue using Carma that don't align with what we believe in. All right, I've showed you how the paradigm shift in shared transportation is going to alleviate our congestion problems. Now, in case I haven't sold you on the utopian world that sharing can bring about, how about this? You'll save time and money. Save time when we get cars off the road. Again, 900,000 empty seats clog Austin's roads every day. Here in Austin, Carma has over 1,300 users with more than 3,500 passenger trips. And we're growing that number week after week. We're cleaning up the streets by sharing our cars. We've all experienced this before, driving down Mopac or I-35, sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, driving alongside our neighbor, headed in the same direction we are. We tell ourselves, oh, I'm stuck in traffic, this is terrible. Now, I hate to burst your bubble, but one is not simply in traffic, one is traffic. Get your car off the road, and you'll save money. Save money when we share the cost of transportation, the cost of parking, gas, the cost of a vehicle. Drivers get paid by passengers, making money while on their normal commute to and from work, or anywhere else for that matter. Our drivers qualify as completely legal ride sharing, which is defined as any compensatory exchange below the 54 cents per mile threshold. For this reason, we are endorsed and partially funded by Texas Department of Transportation, Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority, and the Austin City Council. Now, in closing, the Austin Chronicle wrote a great cover story last month about the need for Austinites to take the transportation issues into our own hands. In the article titled "Getting Off the Road" by Robin Ross, she writes, "Rail will help, roads will help, but so will your decision not to drive today." So, is building more roads the answer? Sorry, but no. Civil engineers, city planners, and people more well-versed in the matter than myself have concluded that the phenomenon of induced or latent demand applies directly here. The Field of Dreams principle will fill up these roads. If you build it, they will come. Randy Michemel, professor of engineering at University of Texas, said, "I tell my class every day we could solve our congestion problems overnight, and we wouldn't have to buy anything or build anything." His class says, "Wow, this guy's a genius." He tells them, "No, I'm just talking about carpooling. If we put 2 people in every car instead of 1, that's easy math. And it's immediate." Julie Mazur of Campos said, "There's a lot of great projects going on right now. Project Connect, Mobility 35, and that's the future. This, carpooling, is something we can do today. Carma does this. Download Carma on iPhone and Android today and get there together tomorrow." Thank you very much. And I will also be plugging in right here and give you a little view of what the app looks like as well. And happy to answer any questions while I take care of this. I was pretty convincing, so.
What is the cost model? What
what are riders paying?
Per mile, each rider pays 20 cents per mile. 17 cents out of that 20 goes to the driver, up to 3 passengers, up to that 54 cents per mile threshold, which keeps all of our drivers completely legal. And then Carma takes that at 3 cents in the middle right there. Did it pop up right there? Are there any other questions? Right over here.
How do you match like someone who needs a ride with someone who wants a ride?
I'll show you right over here, but basically each user plugs in their origin and their destination, and then the app pairs them, gives you the interface right away to be able to communicate and send each other a message through the app. And you can even call your user, which we use a masked number, so you're not actually dealing with other people's real phone number to maintain privacy. In the back of the table.
How many drivers do you have in Austin, and do you have them at all hours?
Yes, so the way ours is set up is drivers heading from A to B, Monday through Friday, let's say the domain to downtown. So depending on the network, right now we have 1,300 active users. Out of that, we have a good heat map on the website as well, which shows the most active areas, which are domain, northwest part of town, all the way through central, huge activity here in downtown, and then south as well. And continuing to build our transportation network outside of that.
So all hours of the day. It seems like a real commuter solution, but I wonder if it's really available, like
definitely we're targeting the commute. That's our bread and butter right now. As people, we're really trying to change the way their habits, because carpooling exists, yeah, but a lot of people don't find it feasible because A, B, and C. But now with our technology, we can make it real time, which will be the next step, is that, hey, I've got to go out to the Circuit of the Americas, a one-time trip, it's far away, I know there's gonna be a lot of other people going there, let's see who else is headed in that direction in the next 30 minutes. The functionality is built into the app right now, but we feel like that's the next step after we can tell people, hey, use it to commute first, then when they get sold on the value of that, then the one-off trips make more sense. Right over here.
Can you sign up to be just a rider, or do you have to be a driver?
You can sign up. You sign up as a user, and then from there you can toggle between driver and rider many times throughout the day. If you say, hey, I don't want to drive today, I'll drive tomorrow. However somebody wants to use it, there's a real easy toggle between the two functions. Joseph.
Can we invite you guys into our neighborhoods and like help sponsor parties, because it helps if our neighbors are into it as opposed to not?
Absolutely. Neighborhood outreach is going to be huge for us, and corporate outreach is going to be big, because the initial hurdle is getting in the car with a stranger, but if we can mitigate that by saying, you're not getting in the car with a stranger, you're getting in the car with somebody you live with at Circle C, or Blockhead Creek, or somebody here at Brazos Tech District, a coworker, GSD&M, those types of things. So that's going to be a big opportunity for us as well. Yes, sir.
What's the difference between what you guys do that allows this and what the city is pushing back on with Uber and Lyft?
Yes, sir.
I mean, what allows y'all to do it and the other guys are really swimming upstream?
The pay structure. So our drivers are entirely below that 54 cents per mile threshold, not for profit at all. As a corporation that reimburses employees can also do up to that threshold, in the same way we operate underneath that same policy. Any other questions?
Well, what if the IRS changes that ruling, how you would model your business after that?
We'll change according with any rules that are put in place. Over here.
Are they considering allowing to bump that up a little bit to make it more of a culture shift, if more people take advantage of it?
The 54 cents per mile?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's something we have no control over. That's either a federal.
Yeah. Are y'all moved to discussion, or is there any?
No, not to my understanding. Really, what we're trying to do is get people to see the value in getting cars off the road, and then the compensation and the 54 cents a mile is just kind of the icing on the cake. We also have big incentives. One is a pilot program we have right now on the 183 toll road and the Manor Express toll road, that we have toll reimbursements for our Carma users, that as they're passing underneath the toll gantry, if they're using the Carma app and they have 2 people or more, it's a full reimbursement, if they have one passenger use pilot program that we're planning on developing throughout the rest of the state. Yes, sir.
Just point of information, your 54 cents, that's just what the IRS allows for people to take off their taxes for use of their automobile, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that number has never gone down. It goes up every few years. And it's what the IRS thinks, I think they overstated maybe, but what they really think it costs to operate a car. So it's their number for you're going to break even. Right? You can't make money at 50, right?
Exactly.
But it's never going to go down. And
Inflation.
I don't think any of these other factors will affect it. You know, there's some accountants saying depreciation, oil, car payments, 54 cents. Because it used to be 25 and it's 30, 35. But it may not be old enough.
As prices go up, I'm sure those rates will as well.
That's never going to change.
Besides the 2 cents?
Yes, besides the 3 cents per mile, a large portion of it is those federally funded grants. As well, our CEO has Sean O'Sullivan, investor of Khan Academy, also has a big bankroll that this is his pet project. He is going to make sure Carma is success that he wants it to be. Based in Cork, Ireland. And Lauren, our committee manager, is here as well, and she knows a lot as well. Thank you very much for your time. We also have a $1 million API prize for developers that can encourage more user acquisition into the Carma app. So tell developer friends if they want to make $1 million, it's a great chance to do that. Thank you very much.
So what I think is great about not only both of these people that have spoken tonight, but also last time we met, is that these guys are giving people options that aren't there yet. So I think that's really great. Our next speaker, one of the reasons why they started organizing was because there was a lack of options for people. So the next speaker is ATX Safer Streets, Sarah Levine.
I think it should all be set up.
Okay, cool.
Let's see if it is.
It's loud.
Good thing I don't have a dirty background on my computer. Alrighty, let's see. Yeah, let's see how it's not transferring it over like it did before.
Sure.
It was supposed to be on.
So were you going to drag this over to that?
Yeah. But it's not really oh, there it goes. Here. I'm gonna do that. Yeah.
So like I said, this is Sarah Levine with ATX Safer Streets.
Let's get this started over again. Okay, awesome.
Cool.
All right, thank you. All right, guys, I'm Sarah. I'm with ATX Safer Streets. We started at the end of March, and basically we're advocates for improved late-night transportation and parking options in Austin. We have a tremendous issue with drunk driving in town, as I'm sure everybody here is familiar with. And we're pushing to reduce those through better options. We want more buses. Apparently it's not going to go over on its own now that I flipped it back over there. All right. So we're asking for expanded, extended bus service. We're asking for more taxis with improved customer service response. We would also like the regulated TNCs like Uber and Lyft to the market, and they are, sort of. And then we'd also like to see a cessation of predatory towing practices. It really discourages people from doing the right thing and leaving their car behind if they're getting towed. We think that's a big issue with it. So we've done a few things. We've done some surveys. We've also managed to get rid of towing underneath the I-35 bridge on weekends. So you can now park there overnight. And about the same time that was instituted, we also got Uber and Lyft moved into town. And so we pulled up the DWI stats for the last 5 years from about April when we started to now July. Obviously, there's 2 days left in July, but no more weekends. So you'll see, if you look at the blue, that's this year, and you'll see that it's had the biggest drop in DWIs in the last 5 years. And we think a lot of that has to do, obviously, with more options, obviously more awareness. We've gotten the word out a lot. A lot of people are talking about what they can do to stop drinking and driving. And then, of course, being able to leave your car under the I-35 bridge, which is where all of my friends pretty much got towed from. So that was a big one for us. We are also right now working with Austin music people and a working group of the Music Commission to do a survey of downtown employee parking to see what we can do to help alleviate some of the congestion, some of the issues that they're facing, especially late at night. One of the big studies that we use for trying to push for later transportation for the buses, to have them run later, is a 2009 study out of Cornell University called One for the Road. They did a study of the Metro line in DC, which extended its hours until 3 a.m. in 2003. It was a very thorough scientific study. It's obviously hard to see at the bottom, but you guys can hit me up anytime online for the link to it. But they found that expanding until 7 a.m. And gave a 7% increase in the number of people riding the Metro. Each hour reduced fatalities due to drinking and driving by 70%, and accidents in general due to drinking fell about 40%. So it was a huge study that showed that public transportation has a big impact in people's choice not to drink and drive. At the same time, though, they did find that the rate of non-vehicular alcohol-related incidents went up because people were getting drunker since they didn't have to drive and getting into fistfights on the street. Obviously, we have a problem there, but you know, if less cops are dealing with DWIs, they'll be able to spend a little bit more time doing other things. So also, going now back to the TNCs, we pulled up 2 things. Obviously, these are not scientific studies. Correlation does not prove causation, but it is interesting to note that both in San Francisco and Philly, that there was a rapid decline in drinking and driving, DWI arrest after they came into town. It's good to note that too. Obviously, the more options that people have, the more likely they are to make a smart choice. That pretty much concludes it. So we're actually meeting with Cap Metro here in a little bit, a couple weeks, to discuss what they're planning to do in January with some of their service changes, and they say we'll like it, so hopefully that's good. We're continuing to push for the TNC's pilot program, make sure that all goes smooth and we get them in. And then we're also working to end towing, and we're hoping to get more taxis in town as well. There is a working group on that. So does anybody have any questions for me?
How can we help?
Get the word out is the biggest one. You can sign up to volunteer with us. We are a Texas nonprofit. Donations are huge for us. We spend a lot of money in printing costs. We're trying to get all of our lawyer fees finalized for 501c3 as well right now, which is not cheap if anybody has done that before. So if you guys want to help, you can come talk to me or Neil right here afterwards, and then we can give you a call, we can let you know. But yeah, getting the word out. I mean, obviously the reason we've been as successful as we have in such a short time is word of mouth. People really get behind what we're doing. It's a very common sense approach to drinking and driving. There's no judgment. It's just, hey, we have a problem. How can we fix this? And we do that through people. So yeah, hit us up. For the most part, the people that really get on us are the people that tell us that people should just stop drinking. And obviously in a city that makes approximately $1.6 billion a year from our nightlife economy, not only do people like drinking, but the city likes the money that comes from it. It's not a very practical means to reduce impaired driving. And then we've gotten some pushback from the taxis as well, but for the most part, it's been the people that feel like everybody should just give up drinking completely. So many hands.
Do you look at pedestrians and crosswalks and, things like that? You did mention like people getting hit by cars.
Well, I mean, pedestrians, especially both cyclists and pedestrians, are a big issue with getting hit in this town. I mean, from the first 6 weeks that we started, we had 9 pedestrian deaths in that time. That's unheard of. People need to be a little bit more careful crossing the street, but our focus right now is on transportation. So at some point, when we get all those solved, we would definitely like to tackle the issues with pedestrians as well.
As you said, safer streets, that's like somebody walking, not necessarily somebody driving drunk.
We kept the name ambiguous, so when we finish one goal, we can move on to the next one. Scott?
Can you put the DWI statistics back up?
Which ones? The ones from here or Philly?
From here.
Okay.
I'm just curious what sort of feedback you get when you present those in the meetings that you're going into. What is Cap Metro saying? What is the city saying? That's a pretty compelling drop.
I mean, that's a huge drop, and both this month and last month dropped tremendously. And I mean, we really have, this is kind of the first time that I actually pulled this up. I've been waiting till the end of this month too, because both the TNCs and the parking underneath I-35 is so new. We were kind of waiting, and so I pushed this one back as much as I could to the end of this month. But we'll continue to see if it has that downward trend. And I mean, this is cannon, fodder for our cannon, basically. This is pointing out that bringing these other options and reducing towing is helping in the city.
Are you pulling the stats from APD?
We're pulling it from Crime Lab, which pulls from APD.
Can you make this available to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
I honestly don't know if this is city law or state law or anything like that, but if you look at any of bar closing times, I know internationally there's a lot of cities, Berlin, Tokyo, where they don't have a closing time. So the culture is that you catch the last bus to start drinking, and then you go home when the bus starts running again at 5.
Well, I could say in Berlin, I definitely drank until I fell over. But that's a. So, as an ex-bartender, I will say that it's a huge shift to try to change the drinking culture. When you do, a lot of people that don't work in the industry don't think about this, but when daylight savings kicks in, and what is it, I think in the fall that you have an extra hour to drink, people take way too much advantage of that, and by their new 2 a.m., they're a disaster. Everybody in the bar is a mess. So, perhaps not being so open-ended with it is a good thing. Tell people to go home and sleep it off. Just do so in a safe manner.
Could you say that drop is potentially due to the fact that the students are not here right now? Summer break, it's the slowest time for breaking downtown for all the bars.
You could say that, and that could be a reason, but if you look at the other months too, on that, or the other years, you'll see that they don't have that same drop. In fact, 2 of the 4 climb at around this time.
First, I just want to say thank you, Sarah, because I think the work you do is amazing. Recently, I know Houston was able to get their public bus to go 24/7 without having, I think it was an increase in cost. Is that something that you think Capital Metro would ever be open to? Because I feel like that's one of the hurdles, is that they won't run later. There's always a reason why it costs more. There's this and that, but another city larger than Austin was able to make that happen. And obviously public transportation running 24/7 benefits everyone in Austin, but especially when we're saying leave your car at home, don't even bring it down. Do you feel at all that there's the way that they set their system up is something that we could use in Austin?
Sorry, I'm one of the planners working on that in Houston. It's 18/7, not 24. It's not all night.
Not all night. When does it go till?
I think the last ones were around 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you might ask him about that as well. I mean, we would love to see a system like that. 24-hour bus system would be awesome. And you would know more about it than I do, but they redid that by revamping all of the lines. They did straight lines instead of curvier ones as well. So, I mean, that would be awesome. That would be our end goal, yes.
Can you talk about the parking study that you are doing?
Yes. So we're actually launching it this Thursday. It's a working group from the Music Commission, Austin Music People, and us. And we're just getting, basically, it's on our webpage. We will be announcing it publicly and putting it out there on Thursday. But it's a series of questions to kind of find out where people that work downtown, especially late at night, are coming from, how they get there, how they're parking downtown, how much you're spending on parking, how safe they feel going back to their cars. There's about, I think, 10 questions on there. So we're going to be doing, handing out cards to all of the businesses downtown, asking the employees to fill them out, and then and we'll see what the results are from that.
What's your study time frame? When is that
Well, we're setting it at about 2 weeks, but if things kind of taper off pretty fast, like it seems like we've gotten a pretty good response back, we're going, as we go from business to business, we're also asking them in person how many employees they have, so we'll kind of get an idea of when we're reaching a good goal. Not bad. All right.
So now we're going to switch to longer presentations about Urban Rail specifically. Like I said, we have one point of view for their Urban Rail proposal and one opposed. And they'll each get 20 minutes to speak, and then we'll have around 10 minutes for Q&A. I expect there to be a lot of questions on each side, so we wanted to put enough time in for that. The first is John Michael Vincent Cortez, who works for Project Connect. He will be giving, obviously, the point of view in support of Urban Rail.
I'll let you deal with that.
While he gets set up, how many of y'all have heard about the Urban Rail proposal in Austin? Okay, last meeting we broke up into groups, and I went over there for the transit, rail, and bus groups. And there were some that had never heard of the Urban Rail proposal, had a hard time getting that information, so we decided it would be a good idea to have, dedicate a whole hour to discuss it. We'll let them get set up and then we'll start.
Well, we're setting up a few visual things. Let me ask a few questions. I know Jace asked, but I had my back turned. How many of y'all have heard of Project Connect? About half of y'all? Good, good. Let me ask you another question. How many of y'all have lived in Austin or Central Texas less than 15 years? Most of y'all. Well, I'm joined here tonight by a few of our partners. Kelly Bland, who's working with me in Capital Metro's Community Involvement Department, and Cheyenne Krause with the City of Austin's Transportation Department. And the first thing you ought to know about Project Connect is that what it really is a partnership and a plan and vision. A partnership and plan to develop a system of high-capacity transit options to meet the needs of Central Texas. And it's really important, those of you who haven't been here very long, to understand that this is a partnership, because what you probably don't realize is that Austin hasn't always, the various municipalities, counties in Central Texas hasn't always worked well and played well together over the years. What Project Connect really represents is our first successful regional partnership to identify solutions for some of the challenges regarding transportation and regarding public transportation that have been caused by our tremendous growth. Let me ask you another question. How many of y'all who have recently arrived here, and I say recent, within the last 15 years, recently arrived here and you came from a community that already had a pretty good public transportation system? So a few of you. Okay. I wonder where the rest of y'all are from. London? Oh, yeah, that's pretty good. So those of you who have maybe come from a community like that, or maybe have traveled to London or places in Europe or other places in the United States that have a fully built out public transportation system, know that here in Central Texas, we are way behind, especially given the growth that we've been experiencing and will experience in the future. This is the fastest growing community of its size in the United States, and there's no signs that it's going to slow down anytime soon. So one of the things that Project Connect has been very mindful about is not wasting a lot of time talking about the problem as much, because I think we've heard about it all night tonight. What is the problem? Well, we have multiple problems, but the one that seems to be top on everybody's mind is congestion, traffic. We are one of the most congested places in the country, and are approaching, in a relative sense, one of the most congested places in the entire country. And I think that if you look at it, you research the issue, and it's been, again, mentioned very eloquently by several of the other presenters tonight, roundabouts, maybe not directly, and that's, we need it all. This is not a rail versus bus versus roads versus bike share, car share, apps, ride share. We are not all competing with each other, because quite frankly, we need it all. We need more bicycle infrastructure. We need more innovation in technology. We need to use the roads that we have and the empty seats that we have more effectively. The Chamber of Commerce, and I really suggest that if you haven't had a chance to look at it, you go to their website, austinchamber.com, I believe. They published their 2013 mobility report, and they really did a very thoughtful study on what it would take here in Central Texas to truly address our transportation challenges, and they came to the same conclusion. We need it all. We also need people to change when they work, where they work, how they work. We need more people telecommuting. It's not one or the other. We need it all, and that's important. And Project Connect represents one piece of that solution, which is the vision for a high-capacity transit system to serve Central Texas. So a little bit more about Project Connect. We've been working with our partners throughout the 5-county area for the last 4 or 5 years to develop that vision. And really, and I think this is important based on what you might hear later tonight, it's not about the technology. It's not about, gosh, we just need rail, or gosh, we just need bus rapid transit, or we need more express services. As I mentioned, we need it all. It's about putting the right tool in the right place at the right time. One of the misconceptions about public transportation is that, well, a rail line is a rail line, a bus is a bus, you stop it, no big deal. Actually, they are all designed specifically to meet a unique travel and transportation need. If you think about your transportation needs, it's like your fingerprint. Yeah, we tend to go downtown, we tend to go to UT, we tend to go to the airport, but everybody needs to go different places at different times for different needs. Your transportation pattern is like your fingerprint. It's almost impossible to have one system. Actually, I would say it is impossible to have one system that meets everybody's unique transportation needs perfectly 100% of the time. There's nothing that can do that. Within public transportation, what we try to do is offer the right kind of service to meet specific transportation needs. So we have services like Metro Rail, which are designed to be, which is a commuter rail. It's designed for commuting needs, long distance commuting needs from the suburbs. We have local buses like the ones through downtown, which stop very frequently to meet more localized transportation needs. Everything about those, from the vehicles to the schedules to the fares to the way the seats are designed, how hard the seats are, all sorts of different things, attributes of it are specifically designed to meet a certain need. And what Project Connect has done is put the right tool in the right place at the right time to meet the unique travel needs here in Central Texas. And so we've developed this vision, and Cheyenne has passed out a fold-out map. This is the vision for a system that really does try to get to the places where people are coming from and where they need to get to, using all sorts of different kinds of transit, because again, the needs are so varied, and quite frankly, not all communities are ready for certain kinds of transit. So we really tried to be realistic and effective in designing the system. The good news is we have pieces in place already. We have the Metro Rail Red Line, which is that commuter rail line, operating very successfully. Those of you who ride it, I know folks here at Capital Factory do ride it quite a bit. That thing, as those folks know, is completely full, standing room only by the time it hits its third station in the morning coming out of the northwest, and absolutely full leaving every afternoon. So full, we're pretty much out of room. And the feds and actually recently TxDOT just gave us some grants to expand capacity to try to meet more of that travel demand. So that's in place and going to get better. You're going to hear lots more exciting things about Metro Rail in the future. Metro Rapid, which was our first investment in bus rapid transit. We just opened our first line to 801 just this past January, operated successfully. Ridership grows on it every month. It's working well. Still some things we need to do to improve it, but it's a great start. Starts from North Lamar all the way through the University Capitol downtown, then all the way down South Converse to Slaughter in South Park Meadows. Right about to open our second Metro Rapid line, the next line on the map, because again, we've got to continue to move projects forward, is the Metro Rapid 803 from the Domain all the way down Burnett Road through the University Capitol downtown and then all the way down South Lamar to Westgate where the Central Market is. And then finally, the next project under construction right now, those of you who have the misfortune on driving on Mopac North in the morning or afternoon know about Mopocalypse. It's a temporary pain, but at the end of it, there'll be a really good news. We'll have those express lanes that the Mobility Authority is building. Now, most people see that as a road project for cars, and it is. For those of you who are running late, need to get to a meeting or in a hurry, you can pay for the privilege of driving in your own car in these express lanes. And those of you can see there's like a rendering it here. While everybody else is stuck on Mopac, you can be in your car, or maybe if you're on Carma in a carpool and zip by everybody stuck in traffic at 55 miles an hour in your own car or somebody else's car if you're sharing. But the big benefit is we will be running express transit in those lanes, which really makes the transit a real choice for people. While everybody else is stuck illegally texting on Mopac, they will see people zipping by them in a nice express coach with Wi-Fi legally texting at 55 miles an hour. And so then it becomes a real choice for people to sitting in congestion. So those are the projects funded and under construction. So what Project Connect has been all about the last couple of years is what's next. Again, we're 30 years behind. We're a couple of generations behind because we've been bickering about this for the last 20, 30 years. So what we have done is tried to identify what are the next projects that we need to put into place to build out this vision for a system. If you remember nothing else that gets said tonight, by me at least, remember this one thing. No one rail line, no one bus route, no one app, no one road is going to solve all of our problems. We need an entire system to do that. If there were only one road in Central Texas, one road, it would be completely full. But all the hundreds of thousands of people that didn't have the fortune to live or work along that one road would think it was a tremendous waste of money because it doesn't meet their needs. The reason why driving is so popular, one of the many reasons why driving is so popular, the roads go everywhere. We've got a built-out network of roads that go to all the places that people need to go. We, until very recently, had one rail line, and it was a commuter rail line, a limited one at that. It's full every day. But those people who do not have the good fortune to live and work along it probably think it's a tremendous waste of money because it doesn't meet their needs, because it's one line. Just as one road is not going to solve our challenges, one rail line isn't either. We need a fully built out system. We tend to focus on what's the next project and look at that in a vacuum. That's not the project. The system is the project. Everything we talk about is just the next step. If the internet only went to one website, nobody would use it. The fact that the internet goes to every website, that's what makes it useful. It's the network effect. It's the system effect. That's what we're trying to get to. We've got to keep our eye on the ball and continue to make progress towards building out the system. So we have these projects under construction. Capital Metro and our partners recently undertook a couple of year-long study looking at what are the solutions in the fastest growing part of our region, which is what we call the North Corridor. Georgetown, Hutto, Round Rock, Pflugerville into Central Austin. Initially, we thought, hey, let's build a commuter rail line up there, right? That was our best guess. But then after actually studying it, what we determined was, hey, you know what? We don't need a commuter rail line there. That's not what they need, and they're not ready for it. So what we identified was a system of bus options, bus-based options, extensions of our Metro Rapid service, express transit running in more congestion-resistant and congestion-proof facilities, in some cases on its own dedicated road. We looked at east-west arterial bus connections, a whole network serving the North Corridor, connecting into other high-capacity transit like Metro Rail, Lone Star Rail, and a future urban rail system that would connect everything together in that fast-growing North Corridor. So I want this to be said, because you may hear this later. We are not married to any kind of technology. We want to put rail where it makes the most sense, because it is a significant investment. We will put buses where they make sense too, because again, we need it all. So we identified these projects in the North Corridor, and we're going to be working with our partners in Round Rock, Hutto, Pflugerville, Georgetown, and Williamson County to make these things happen over the next 10 years. And you're going to start to see some announcements in the next few years about those services starting up. So we're real excited about that. But once we get everybody into Central Austin, right here, on Metro Rail or one of these projects in the North Corridor, then what do? How do people get around? How do they make connections to other pieces of the system? We knew we needed to make another investment just here in Central Austin to meet the needs, and there's lots of needs here in Central Austin. And so we went through a very intense, very data-driven, collaborative process to identify what is our next project in high-capacity transit in Central Austin. And that was the Central Corridor Study. And where we arrived is a recommendation, and you have a map of that too, a first investment in an urban rail system, one line that would be the start of an eventual urban rail system that would serve most of Central Austin, running till 2 in the morning, right, at least, all right, on the weekends too, that would connect in to a regional system. And by the way, we will continue to invest and improve the local buses because that will always be a critical, important part and a very flexible part of what we do. But that would feed into the other high capacity transit options to provide the kind of service that Central Texas needs to deal with the challenges that it faces now and is scalable. And that's very, very important. We cannot plan for the travel demand today. We can't plan for the travel demand for 10 years, 20 or 30 years. We have to plan for something that we can scale up, that we can add capacity to over time to be able to meet the demands that we know we're going to have in the future. Because if there's one safe bet in the world, is that Austin, Texas' population will double every 20 years. That's happened since its founding. That's, I think it was 1839. So that happened through civil wars, depressions, recessions, world wars. Austin, it's gone up and down, but overall, it's doubled about every 20 years. That's a pretty safe bet. So we need to plan for the future. And it's not just about Central Austin. As I mentioned, we did the North Corridor Study, the Central Corridor Study. Next up, and what we plan to advance in the next couple of years is the Northwest Corridor Study. Those of you in the tech industry know we have a huge concentration of jobs in the Northwest Corridor, going up to Riata and all those places up along 183 and 360. We need to look for options in that area. Next would come the Southwest Corridor Study. So getting down to Buda, Kyle, San Marcos, Oak Hill, where we have a tremendous amount of residential demand and people who need to get into the Central Corridor. And then the East Corridor, going out to Maynard and Elgin, also very fast-growing communities, to get them into the employment and civic and cultural centers here in Central Austin. So if you're not part of the North Corridor or Central Corridor, we will get to you. It's coming. We've got to build a system. So let me focus then on urban rail in the next couple of minutes in the Central Corridor. The issue here in Central Austin, first we needed to define what is our study area. So we identified an area that's roughly 2222, Koenig, Northland, Allendale on the north, Springdale and Grove on the east, Old Torf to the south, and Mopac to the west. So within this box we defined as Central Austin, we said, okay, one, there's 3 places that we have to connect with high capacity transit because they are such a draw and they generate so much travel demand. That is where we are today, the Central Business District, the State Capitol Complex, and the University of Texas campus. Those 3 things remain the economic, civic, and cultural hub of our region, and they need to be connected. So then the big question is, where do we go from there? What needs to be connected next? So we broke up that Central Corridor, that Central Austin, into different travel sheds based on travel demand, environmental factors, public input, etc. So we divided it up that way, and we said, where do we go next? And we looked at all sorts of data and asked a lot of questions, which the public helped us answer. And at the end of the day, 2 things. One, you could make a very logical, passionate argument for going into any one of these directions. And people have. And I'm sure, even though the decision's made, they will continue to do so, and that's fine, that's great civic dialogue. But looking at all the data at the end of the day, there were 2 corridors that jumped out as making the most sense for our next investment and our first investment in urban rail. And that is what we call the East Riverside Corridor. So running from East Riverside and Grove up to just south of downtown, crossing Lady Bird Lake, going into that core of the core, downtown, Capitol, UT, and then headed due north, just west of I-35 up to the Highland area, which is what we call the Highland Corridor. So, and there's a lot of reasons. No one piece of data tells the whole story, but if you had to pick a couple, what these corridors exhibited more than any other corridors is congestion. Again, going back overwhelmingly, the public told us over and over again, and this was a very publicly driven process, that they wanted us to provide real alternatives to the ridiculous congestion that we face here in Central Austin. And when you look at all of these corridors, they're all awful. They're all terrible, they're all congested, they all need high capacity transit. But looking at it objectively using data, the most congested stretch of road, not in the city of Austin, not in Travis County, but in the entire state of Texas, is IH-35 from 290 to Ben White. It's the worst stretch of road as far as congestion in the state of Texas. So we identified a project or a corridor that could try to provide an alternative to that most congested stretch of road in Texas. And that really was a differentiator. Other differentiators, the growth that we know is going to occur in those corridors. Has anybody been down East Riverside lately? Yeah. Right? You see what's happening there and what's going to happen. And that doesn't mean things aren't going to happen other places. South Lamar is going crazy. South Congress, other corridors are going crazy. But these are the growth corridors and the employment corridors now and in the future, especially in downtown. So at the end of that first phase of the study, we knew we needed some sort of project that did that as the next investment. But again, we weren't married to any technology. Deploy the right tool in the right place at the right time. We didn't say, oh, that's where our rail line should go. We said, that's where our next project should go. What does the project need to do? And we started with a blank slate. We used, we're getting up to about 250 plus now, public involvement, all sorts of different kinds of events, from one-on-one briefings, stakeholder briefings, open houses. And we asked a lot of questions, and I won't go into all the details, but here's first and foremost what we asked. How much? 2 minutes. What kind of service do we need? What do you want to see, whether it's bus or rail? What kind of service do you need? And what do we need to meet the demands here in the Central Corridor? What people told us overwhelmingly, you need to show up when you tell me you're going to show up, and you need to get me there when you tell me you're going to get there. That's the challenge we face with local buses. It's stuck in the same traffic as everything else. It's unreliable, especially at rush hour. So people told us prioritize reliability, so that's what we did. This project, whatever it was going to be, was going to run in its own right of way so that it wouldn't be stuck in traffic, so it can be 99% reliable. They said it needs to be frequent. Nobody wants to wait 30 minutes on a day like this for a ride. So we designed this in such a way, whatever the service was going to be at least every 10 minutes at rush hour, 15 minutes when it's not rush hour. So when we're taking drunk people home at midnight or 2, it will still be running every 15 minutes. So it's going to be very frequent. Stop spacing. People said, I have to be able to get to it easily, and it has to get me to the places I want to go. So that means the stops, we don't want them every other block like a local bus, but we don't want them every 10 miles apart like Metro Rail in many cases. So about every half mile, because there's so many destinations here in Central Austin. And we said speed, it has to be a real alternative. It can't take me 3 times longer than driving. So this is designed to run about 20 miles an hour on average. That includes stops and boardings. That doesn't sound very fast. Next time you're driving in downtown Austin at rush hour, clock yourself. You are not doing 20 miles an hour. And if you're on a bus, I guarantee you, you're barely even doing 6 or 7 miles an hour at rush hour. So 20 miles an hour will be very competitive travel time in Central Austin. So we started with that service profile. We looked at all the different kinds of transit. We looked at gondolas, subways, high-speed rail, buses, doing nothing. We looked at everything. And at the end of the day, we used what could deliver that service profile. Because again, not every transit tool can do those things. Right tool, right place, right time. We screened out modes, we screened out different alignments because you can't deliver that service profile if you go this way, then this way. So we looked at what are the potential routes in those priority areas we identified. We got down to some likely alternatives, what we call the final alternatives, and then we used a lot of data. What would be the ridership? What would be the cost? We compared the likely suspects together, and at the end of the day, and I'll wrap up with this, Jace, we ended up with our recommendation called the locally preferred alternative. The first line of an urban rail system that will lead to a regional system to meet our growing needs here in Central Texas. And I'm going to end with a quick video.
Every day, nearly 150,000 commuters travel to the heart of Austin. And with 110 people moving to Austin daily, Central Texas continues to grow rapidly. We're using every tool in the transportation toolbox, especially in places where roads simply can't be expanded. That's why we've created Project Connect. This regional vision for a transit system provides alternatives to sitting in traffic and helps support our continued economic prosperity. We've had a lot of help from our community to develop this next step for the Project Connect vision. The Project Connect Central Corridor study tackles some of our region's biggest transportation challenges head on. Starting with the Central Corridor, we studied potential types of transit service, routes, station locations, and scheduling that would work best for the system. The proposed initial urban rail line will connect North and South Austin across the river and connect East and West Austin across I-35. The line would run from East Riverside across Lady Bird Lake through downtown, the University of Texas campus, then up to Hancock Center and to the Highland area. Trains would run along the 9.5-mile line every 10 to 15 minutes, connecting 16 stations and 4 park and ride facilities, providing a real alternative to congestion. The first urban rail line would connect some of the city's most densely populated growth areas, like East Riverside, providing commuters direct access to the heart of the city. Crossing Lady Bird Lake would connect the busy shopping, business, and entertainment areas of downtown. The line would connect to the Metro Rail Red Line at the Convention Center and offer riders access to the Capitol Complex, new medical school, and teaching hospital, before passing through the heart of the University of Texas campus, near the stadium and the Bass Concert Hall. The proposed route would also connect to St. David's Medical Center and Hancock Center, where it would once again connect to the existing Red Line, before arriving at the new ACC Highland project and one of 4 park and ride facilities. This first urban rail proposal is just the beginning. We'll embark on plans for more urban rail lines that will eventually connect other areas of the city, including the airport. In the meantime, we want to continue to hear from you. Share your thoughts on speakupaustin.org, at our open houses, public meetings, or community events near you.
I'm going to turn it back over to Jace. There's lots more to be learned about this particular proposal. I encourage you to look at the thing that we handed out, and I'm sure we're going to get into more details as we get into Q&A. But let me hand it back over to Jace.
Thanks, John Michael. Appreciate it.
So we'll kick it off with Q&A session. We have 10 minutes for Q&A on both sides. So who wants to kick it off? Anyone? Takers? Matt?
I've always wondered what the total price tag of the Project Connect system would be built out, and how many phases would that be?
So total price for the entire system.
The total price for the entire system. Well, that is a challenge because the system evolves. So what happened was, and I kind of referenced this earlier, about 2 years ago, or a year and a half, a year ago, I think, I get my dates mixed up, we developed a regional vision for what we think the system needed to look like, and needed to do. And that was the Project Connect system vision. It was approved by the Transit Working Group. It was endorsed by leaders all over the region, Round Rock City Council, Eureka Chamber, Austin City Council, etc. In that vision, my understanding was the estimate over the next 20 or 30 years was about $4+ billion to build the whole thing. But that was our sketch plan. And that sketch plan, and planning is a very iterative process. And as you want to get more and more focused as you go along. Think of it like if you wanted to build a house. You're probably going to first, think about what is it I want? I need 3 bedrooms. I'm going to sketch out what I think I want. You're not going to build off of that. You're going to hand it to an architect and engineer to actually get you the blueprints, figure out exactly what you need, what's feasible, what's going to work, and that's what you build off of. With the vision that we came up with, that we put a preliminary price tag of around $4 billion, that was our sketch plan. Since then, we identified, remember I told you in the North Corridor, we thought, hey, let's run a commuter rail up that old rail right-of-way to Pflugerville and Round Rock. Well, again, after studying it, we came up with a much cheaper bus-based option that we think will actually do even more. So that project is actually less than 1 highway interchange. I think we can do the whole thing for like $165 million of capital. We identified an initial urban rail layer system because that was our guess at the time, and we've identified the first project. So those costs are probably roughly in line, but we haven't done a revised estimate with these new projects that we've identified of what the total build-out cost would be. But I think it's a safe bet to say that, and these are in inflated dollars, so not necessarily today's dollars, around $4 billion, not tomorrow, but over the next 20 or so years would be the full cost for capital. Now it's going to change based on the actual projects that we identify and as we get to detailed design on some of these things, but I think that's a pretty good number to keep in mind over time.
So to chase that last part you were saying regarding the proposed costs over a duration of a certain amount of time, with that type of asset level, what realistic estimate are you using for phase one of that proposed rail to utilize, say, like you were saying before, you said within that initial sketch? Let's hammer that a little bit more specifically. So for that first phase, and how much time frame are you anticipating fulfilling that obligation, and under how much of a budget? Let's get specific. I mean, since we're all throwing out frank questions right now.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about phase one, because that answer you gave him was really vague and really terrible. You said 20 years is not nearly a good answer for that kind of question.
Well, unfortunately, that's the planning horizon that we have to use, because again, we're planning for projects that are going to meet travel demand in the future. So we have to look at this stuff in those kinds of terms. So
is that realistically the expectation you've got for phase one?
Well, for phase one, no. For phase one, we've got a pretty good cost.
So that's my
let me get there. He was asking about the whole system vision.
Right.
So for this particular project, we estimate, and again, these are inflated dollars, year of construction dollars. And when you're at this stage of development, you kind of want to use a worst case scenario number. And so our number for this first urban rail line would be $1.38 billion.
Okay.
$1.38 billion. Now, as I said, it's kind of worst case scenario because we're asking the public to contribute much of this money. So the last thing we want to do is go to the public and say, hey, we're going to build this for $1.38 million. We get 5 years into it and say, oops, we miscalculated, we need another $500 million. So we came up with a number within which we feel very, very comfortable that we can deliver this project. So here's, and I didn't get to this detail, so I'm glad you asked it.
Sure.
Here's the components of the cost breakdown. Actual construction is about $730 million, and again, those are in inflated dollars. Professional service, about $240 million, about $17 million. Vehicles, about 3% at $40 million, and right-of-way at about 3%. A big chunk of that, almost, let's see, what is that? Almost 1/4 of that $1.38 billion is contingency.
Right.
Contingency. So we can ensure that we can deliver this project within this number. Now, the other piece that's very critical to the development of this project is that we cannot afford that number on our own. We've designed this project as much as possible to be competitive for federal funding. We believe this is a very competitive project for FTA New Starts money, which would cover 50% of that capital cost. So $1.38 billion, we'd be asking the local taxpayer some way, somehow, likely through, most of it through a City of Austin transportation bond this November, to foot about half of that or less, $600 to $700 million of this capital cost to be matched by an FTA grant for the other 50%.
Sure. And on what time frame? The second part of my question was, what kind of time frame would you anticipate that being fulfilled by?
Absolutely. So should there be a successful election in November, that's the way we proceed. Then immediately after that, we go into, for federal funding, it requires an environmental study, a NEPA study, National Environmental Policy Act. That takes a couple of years, and that's when you get to a further level of design and make sure that if we put this infrastructure in place, we're not creating more problems than we're solving. We're not endangering wetlands or some cave spider or something like that. And that's why you build in a contingency, because of things like that. So that would take a couple of years. Then you get into your, you go into the New Starts process, and then you start to do your more detailed design and engineering. And so at the end of it, we think we can have this up and running by late 2021, early 2022. That's when it would be running. But meanwhile, again, because we're so far behind, while that environmental study and other, we're not going to stop. We're going to plan the Southwest Corridor. Right. We're going to identify what are the next 2 or 3 Central Corridor urban rail extensions that we want to do, because we have to continue to advance projects so that when the money's there, we're ready. We're not sitting around.
Are you then within that, so when you're doing the supplemental plans, are you then taking those FTA funds and using those for that, or are you then having to apply for grants?
We're going to move on to other questions, but after this conversation, y'all can have further the conversation. I encourage, I'm sure John Michael would want to have further conversations after this meeting as well. So
absolutely.
We have allocated time for
as long as there's
networking and more Q&A afterwards. Let's go to another question. How about you, Joseph Copser?
John Michael, thanks again for the presentation. My question deals with the knowledge that we know that within the next 10 years, autonomous vehicles and autonomous buses are going to absolutely forever change the landscape in the United States, especially. Has there been given any thought to that? Specifically, what would happen if rather than pave and build rail to build light rail, we just pave that route in anticipation using, say, an 805 route for a while, knowing that autonomous buses are less than a decade away?
Well, you have a lot more surety about the future than I do. I read probably a lot of the same stuff you do. It's very exciting. We're certainly going to see a lot of disruptive change here with transportation. We're already seeing it with the work that you're doing and that others talked about this evening. But as planners, we have to deal with what we know. What we know. Our transportation challenges are too big to be very speculative. We can't risk it. Certainly we will be open, and I think we have been in every way that we've been asked to try to incorporate innovative solutions within the transportation system. And here's to say that those services wouldn't complement an urban rail system, a regional rail system, a regional bus system. I think that regardless of what technology comes about in the future, we're going to need that too. In addition to this, I think what we're going to need to see is those deployed in this kind of setting that's meeting the peak hour travel demands that we have here in this community before we're ready to just ditch all our other plans and bet on it.
Yeah, I get, just as a clarification, because I don't know if you answered my question, is have we considered it? I guess my larger point is the continent of Africa is a great example. We almost thought we were going to have to spend $200 billion to do landline all throughout the continent of Africa. And in the last 15 years, we've got cell phone technology that's now wired virtually the whole continent. That's my question was, have we put in contingency for that in this process and just saying we don't necessarily need to build the infrastructure?
I don't think we have because, I'll be short because I know we have other questions. I don't think we have, at least not to my knowledge, that we've really spent a lot of time thinking about how those impacts would be because we just don't know enough. And we've got to go based on what we know.
We got a question, you and a half.
Yeah, in regards to the ride sharing, you guys addressed that at all? You're talking about building all this infrastructure, of course. All the seats that are out there right now, I mean, how many, a couple of million could you put into promoting ride sharing, ensuring safety in that area?
Absolutely. We do that now. We actually have a rideshare program at Capital Metro Rideshare. We spend actually, I think, several $1 million on it, and we have van pools and car pools all throughout the region. Again, it's not about this or that. We need it all. We invest in it. We think rideshare is a very underutilized asset, and we need to continue to do it. But again, all the research shows that it's not just rideshare that's going to address all the issues. We got to have it all. So yeah, we need to do that, and we need to do more of it. And we'll continue to do more of it. One thing we tend to focus a lot, and this has come up in all the conversations, on the peak hour commute, on going from home to work or home to school. And that is really important. It's low-hanging fruit for both rideshare, for transit. It makes up the majority of transit trips. But if you look at the commute, if you look at all the different kinds of trips taken for all different kinds of reasons, commutes, if you add it all up, commutes make up like less than 20% of all trips taken. And so designing services just around commutes is not going to address most of the trips we have. It will address the trips we have at the most frustrating times, but we have to design a system that does lots of different things. And I think there's a role for everything that we've talked about tonight, because again, transportation demand is such a complex problem to deal with.
Yeah, one last question.
Yeah, my question is about the Metro Rail, the grants you talked about. Are there any projections for how those are going to affect O&M?
O&M, it will likely, I don't think that actually, let me, there's several different answers to that. O&M. So the first operations and maintenance. So there's two costs to transit, right? There's the cost to build stuff, which people tend to focus on, but even more important is the cost it takes to operate and maintain it over time. So with O&M, what will it cost to operate? I believe the Tiger Grant improvements, the first improvements, will actually allow us to reduce O&M costs per passenger, because the improvements will allow us to increase frequency using the same number of trains. We didn't spend a lot of money on Metro Rail. It was kind of a demonstration project, very successful for the demonstration it was intended to accomplish. The challenge with Metro Rail is it's mostly a single track system. The trains can only pass each other in 3 places. What the Tiger Grant will allow us to do is add more passing tracks so that we can run trains more frequently, turn them around more frequently. Right now, the frequency is every 34 minutes. That's the max. With the Tiger Grants, we can start turning around trains faster, which means more trips with the same operator, with the same vehicles, which would reduce operations and maintenance costs per passenger. The TxDOT grants will allow us to do a number of things, including improve the downtown station, but also buy more trains so that we can really get some frequency in longer and later hours, Sarah. So though, when that happens though, we have to pay more operators to run those trains. So the O&M costs overall would increase, but they would only increase in response to demand. So it remains to be seen what the total impact of operations and maintenance would be. But overall, over time, if you're carrying more people more frequently, you're going to reduce your O&M costs over time.
The Metro Rail currently just addresses those, you said 20% are the commuters by shutting off at 6 p.m. every day, not even going to the end. Isn't it only addressing the commute?
Again, that's what it was designed for. Again, different transportation services it was certainly, especially at the very beginning, designed to meet pretty much commuter needs. You may not remember, I don't know if you were here, but when it first opened, it didn't even do that. There was like 3 or 4 trips in the morning and 3 or 4 trips in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. No midday service, no later evening service, and certainly no weekend service. Over time, we discovered that there's demand for other uses for Metro Rail, and so we've added service to accommodate that demand. Really, transit is pretty reactive to demand. We follow where the demand is, where we see the demand, and we adjust service accordingly. Metro Rail is starting to serve some different needs, like during South by South. Has anybody tried to ride that thing during South by Southwest or ACL? It's ridiculous. It's so full because we found that it's great for special events when a lot of other people need to get into Central Austin. So it is primarily based to be a commuter service. As we are able to reduce frequency, it'll start to serve different kinds of needs, but it will always be more heavily geared towards the commuter service because that's what it's intended to do.
So how do we shift the culture if we have it shut off after 6? We shut it off on Sundays, and then why would all these other ones?
Because they're different services. They won't shut off like that. And Metro Rail hours will increase over time.
So to be equitable to the opposing side, we're going to postpone that conversation. Like I said, y'all can have, John Michael, I'm sure, is willing to have the conversation after this meeting. We've allocated time at the end of this meeting to have further conversations with both John Michael and Gary Hoover, which is our next speaker. Thanks, John Michael.
No problem, Gary.
It's great. Thanks. Let me set up.
Okay, sure.
I just need to be plugged into the video.
Okay. Yeah. This is the part 2.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me here today. I want to make sure everything comes up.
We're going to get you set up.
Yep. Before I forget, I brought cards for anybody that wants one. What's the best way to do this? That's right. I answer all my emails. Look forward to yours. If you like what I say or don't.
There you go. These aren't.
That's what I was just trying to do. Thanks, man. Works for some computers. That's what. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Hey, okay. Testing. You can probably hear me anyway. I do a lot of speaking and all that jazz. Well, thanks again. I'm just a citizen. I thought I would start. Some of you already know me or about me or whatever, but while I'm here, I picked Austin. I've lived in New York. I've lived in Chicago. Certainly very urban situations. I was mugged 3 times getting my bachelor's degree in the ghetto on the south side of Chicago at the University of Chicago, and then promptly moved to New York, which was worse at that time in crime. But after New York, Chicago, Indianapolis, St. Louis, and Dallas, I picked Austin as the best place in America to start the first book stop. Moved here, whatever that is, 32 years ago. I've seen the city grow a lot, and then Hoover's, another success. Went public and sold it on Brad Street. Travel Fest, the first travel superstore. I lost all the money I made on the first 2 because the airlines stopped paying commissions on travel agencies. The travel agencies raised half the money for the first chain of for-profit museums, Road Story USA, and hit the recession of 08 and couldn't raise the rest. A lot of that, needless to say, is about transportation. I visited 400 museums worldwide, including, least 60 that were transportation museums. And my newest one, one reason I'm kind of rushing around today, hopefully we'll launch in the next 10 days the first business simulation games for the iPad, which was an idea I had as a kid. And in the context of those 5 startups, I started keeping a list of business ideas when I was like 12 years old. Here's a list, it's tablet 233, and I'm now up to about 310 business ideas. And the key thing there is, when I look at why do people start businesses, and I was an entrepreneur in residence at the McCombs and now at the School of Information, UT, the reason I start businesses is to innovate. To take things that wouldn't exist if I didn't dream them up, or my friends and I didn't dream them up, and turn them into reality. So it's really the creative urge. And my core is innovation. I love this city. I love the study of cities. I'll talk about that more in a second. I love transportation. I'm not going to be able to vote on this. I'm excluded because I live in Hayes County, although I am a part of the congestion problem, driving into UT and back out. Said I live in a library. This is my urban studies wall, probably 12,000 books on cities, how they evolve, how they grow. I've been passionate about this since I was a little kid. This is an example of an urban studies book to really look at cities around the world and how they actually work. I screwed everything up here. And a close up there. And then this is the only part of the library that's probably bigger. This is a train wall. I have been a train fanatic since I was down here. I have been reading Trains magazine every issue monthly since I was 7, which is a long time. And you can just see. So all I'm trying to say is, these are my credentials. I love this stuff. You go to my YouTube channel, about 70 videos about entrepreneurship, but also one of my most watched ones, I know these aren't great numbers, but 2,100 views is pretty good for me, is one of the most historic tram rides in the world, Lisbon number 28. And this below is time-lapse video I shot of the Trans-Siberian Expresses leaving Moscow. I've taken vacations to Japan to ride bullet trains. I've ridden transit systems in 45 countries. So, in that context, and me as just a citizen really cares about this city, some of the key ideas about all this is I'm just wary of special interest groups. And that gets weird because we are all a special interest group. Bicyclists are a special interest group. People who want to walk are a special interest group. People who live in Dripping Springs are a special interest group. People who love trains are a special interest group. I really believe that we need to focus on what does the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And one of my concerns, I just got back from 3 days in San Francisco at a game convention. The game convention was pretty depressing. I've been to probably 500 conventions in my life, and I've never seen one where people were so obsessed with the fast buck and making money as opposed to product quality. It gives me some hope as going in to compete with those idiots. But the other thing that was a little depressing, San Francisco is one of the most beautiful cities on earth. The architecture, the sunlight, everything about it. That city is in total collapse, in my view, based on, I just walked the streets of the city last week, 3 days in a row. All you have in San Francisco now, it's a totally bifurcated city between wealthy people with Teslas and good jobs at Apple and Google and everything, and homeless people. You have one more segment, which is old eccentrics like me living in rent-controlled apartments, old academics and poets and all that kind of shit, you know. There is no middle class. There are no families. There are no school children. I mean, yes, there's more than zero. But in the big picture, that city's collapsed because of the incredible cost burdens that have been put onto that city. There are a lot of things that work, But as you see, housing prices go up. Houses are no longer affordable. Austin's never going to turn back and become more affordable. San Francisco, followed by Portland. These are cities that I think over time their guts are going to be ripped out. Because when they lose their families, they lose their middle class. And that's an interesting thing about Texas. Austin is the most extreme at going that way. On the other hand, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas are still really wonderful middle class cities. They're cities where people that, I come from industrial Indiana, people that repair our phone lines and serve food and do all kinds of things in our society need a place to live too. And I personally value them every bit as much as I value the CEO of Zynga or whatever. So that's a long-term thing, and the cost. When I hear $1 billion that's, if I figure it right, that's $4,000 for every family in the whole Austin metropolitan area. It's $1,000 per capita and 1.9 million people, give or take. And the average household is going to be 3 people. So you're talking serious money. So one of the things is what really serves the city. The next thing is these problems are regional. No matter how I run different forecasts, 2/3 of the new people moving into the Austin area over the next 10, 20, 30 years, 2/3 of them are going to live outside Travis County. It's the 4 outlying counties of the metropolitan area is where all the growth is, or huge amount of the growth. Maybe 5% of the new people are going to move into downtown Austin. That would be a huge number, actually. And yet here we come up to this thing this fall. I can't vote on it. Most people in Williamson County can't vote on it. While with Campbell and everything, we try to look on a bigger picture. It's still, it's going to be, but most of I-35 traffic are people from Mexico and Oklahoma, and then a big chunk of them are Hayes and Williamson County and everything else. So I think we just tend to plan way too limited way. But then my big point is and parallel to what John Michael said, technology, we need to use the right technology. The thing I see over and over is we confuse what city type we are. Every time, and I love New York and Chicago. If I could afford to live with 55,000 books in the center of Manhattan, I probably wouldn't be here tonight. That's an industrial age city. The entire city was developed, evolved, structurally laid out 100 years ago. It has incredibly high density of population, which changes everything with regard to transit and everything else. And it actually was transit-led growth. You take suburban Chicago, people built houses where the railroads went, like 1870s, 1880s, the Burlington route and everything. Same with the New York Central and Pennsylvania out of New York City. And we didn't have cars, so they built houses where the railroads were. And then later the streetcars came along, 1890s or whatever. My hometown in Indiana was the center of the biggest high-speed rail system on Earth in 1901. It was invented by a guy from Anderson, Indiana. Within 20 years, it was abandoned. It's been outdated. These cities are not growing. New York City is not growing. And every time I say city, I mean the metropolitan area, because that's the only way to think of it. It's the whole region. So Chicago, New York, they're just not relevant to, I call them information age cities. Well, I call them growth cities would be just as good. They are ever forming in amorphous and unpredictable patterns. We don't know where the next Samsung plant's going to be. When I moved here, I talked to all the real estate developers in town. Nobody would have ever dreamed we'd put an airport halfway to Bastrop. And nobody would have ever dreamed that Bastrop had a future. These things change, and they don't change like that in Brooklyn and in Queens, where I used to live. The new homes and jobs appear in unexpected places. No matter what we want and what we believe, over the next 50, 100 years, the Austin metropolitan area is going to be largely automobile-led growth. 2/3 of the people moving into this place are going to be way, way, way from any of these lines. And the thing is, we're growing. People are moving into these cities. They're moving out of the New Yorks and Chicagos. When I talk about the difference, what this is the density. This is a bad cut and paste from the Census Bureau. This is how many people live what distance from City Hall. And this is the New York City line, New York metropolitan area, the purple dots. The green at the bottom is Austin. So even, you come 44 miles from City Hall in New York, and you're still denser, more people than anywhere in the Austin area, which is pretty flat. This is actually what they call population-weighted density. So it really takes into account how many people live in that area. And here you see 5 miles out from City Hall in New York, it's 75,000 people per square mile. 10 miles out, it drops to 49. Hey, Austin, it's not downtown. Our peak is a couple miles out, mile and a half out. And it peaks at 10,000, and then it's essentially zero in the world of New York and Chicago. Rail was ideal for industrial age cities. It had fixed routes for cities that were fixed. Housing followed those routes since the cars weren't here. But some of the issues that come up with rail is higher cost than bus rapid transit and things. And a big thing, I've really just come around to understanding this in the last few months as I've studied it, you don't change rail lines. People don't dig up old rail lines. When I go to Anderson, Indiana, and I looked at the New York Central track that went not far from my house, it was put there in 1852, and it's in the exact same place. That's, new steel. It never changes. If you make a mistake, if things evolve differently, it doesn't change. And in fact, from I studied economics for, my teachers won Nobel Prizes and all that crap at the University of Chicago. And you look at it from an economist viewpoint, what this type of rail in general does is transfers wealth from people that own land away from the track to people who own land near the track. And people who live away, and people that it's just a swap between the people. And one of the things is because it's inflexible, and hey, once it's there, it's going to be there forever, and because it is can be so tightly tied to development and developers and everything else, it can't help but be politicized. And let's face it, when we first talked about maybe having this group, the discussion tonight, the folks that we're going to oppose, John Michael, we're going to be the Aura people who want a different route. If you're talking buses, you're not going to go to battles to, I'm sorry, what's that?
That's not true, actually.
Oh, what was, Aura?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they are opposed to the highway portion, but they're also opposed to the route. Am I correct? Okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to put any bad information up here. In any case, a lot of the debate about light rail is about the route. If you talk to people, hey, it's not near my house. Same things at John Michael. And that just means it's more in the hands of the politicians and less in the hands of the customers and the market. My bottom line is these are things I've seen and spent a lot of time at. You wouldn't do the Taj Mahal today. I guess if you're a trillionaire and your wife dies, you want a nice grave. You wouldn't build the Coliseum today, with very, very few exceptions, you would not build the New York subway system or the Chicago elevated system today. They were wonderful for their time and place, and I should have brought, I have the annual track map book of the entire New York City subway system by inch, One of the things here, not only Austin is different, this is Austin's density curve, the green line in 2000, how many people lived, how many miles from City Hall. The dotted line, the purple, is in 2010. So what this shows is how Austin is changing. And how Austin is changing is people are moving increasingly away from the center. The population growth is primarily between 15 and 20 miles from City Hall, with a second burst up here around 7 miles from City Hall. I mean, you can go into more depth to detail, and I'm more than happy to share slides with anybody. This you are not going to be able to read, but I won't go so far as to apologize. Like this is a little growth model that I use, and I'd be glad to send it to you. It's an Excel spreadsheet. And what I've got here is there's 4 pieces of the Austin area in terms of population, and these are just round numbers because it's just a model for me to play with different assumptions. We got 1,900,000 people, 10,000 or less. Actually, Census Bureau numbers look more like 6,000. 10,000 people live in downtown Austin. 830,000 live in the rest of Austin City, 260 Travis County outside of Austin, and 800,000 in the 4 outlying counties. I have to take, because I'm a numbers junkie, I have to take issue with John Michael on the growth rate. Austin doubling in 20 years, as anybody with their math knows, that means you're growing 3.6% a year. Rule of 72. There is absolutely no way Austin is going to grow 3.6% a year. It's just unbelievable. No way. The city is no way. The metropolitan area, we've been growing around 2%. That's a phenomenal growth rate. And your 100 people a day is around 2%. 40,000 people here, around 2 million people. That's a really steep rate. What I've done here in this assumption is assume downtown goes crazy. Grows 10% a year. Unbelievable rate. It might actually grow a little faster in the early years, but it won't be able to maintain that for, this is a 16-year projection out to 2030. And then I've assumed growth rates roughly in line with history for these other areas. Well, anyway, you cut it. 5% of people move into town, even under a fast growth rate, go downtown. 64% in outlying counties. Transportation is an issue that goes way, way beyond even the city limits. I just think rail being non-adaptable, being fixed, is just an awful investment, especially when you're talking $1 billion, when we could spend it on other things or spend a lot less. So let me just fly through some things. Split shifts, major employers, third of the people work at 8, third at 9, a third at 10. You can give cash incentives to the employers or the employees, or you can just do it through the bully pulpit, but a serious across-the-board effort to do that could have a meaningful impact on congestion. Here, when I talk congestion, I'm talking MOPAC, I-35, and all that. Work-at-home days in a lot of industries, a 4-day, 40-hour work week works. That drops, 20% off of the commute. And I understand commute's not the whole thing. Carpooling. Thing is, we got all this entrepreneurial energy. I just listed a few. Uber, Ride Scout, Car2Go, Zipcar, Jitneys, that's a general concept, not a hot startup, but one that could be killer in Austin. Lyft, Carma. And the thing is, when Carma does their shit, it doesn't cost us anything. Right? I had a government grant and everything, but hey, you didn't take $1.4 billion to get that sucker rolling. Uber is not charging every resident of the county to make it happen. The users are paying for it, and innovative financing ways. And then when you add the driverless cars, I mean, most people I've seen that study that stuff think the driverless cars certainly are coming very soon, but we're talking about doubling or tripling the capacity of all the highways. Because the cars all go closer to each other, right? I mean, you know what it's like when somebody leaves a stoplight and it's 20 minutes later before you move 10 cars back. Driverless cars aren't going to do that, man. They're going to start moving. We need innovation. And it breaks my heart to see a city like Austin looking backwards 100 years for a solution. And for a city like Austin to think that on these kind of issues we can learn from New York City is nuts. Not so humble opinion. We should innovate. We should try new things. We should lead and not follow. So one of the things, there's very little we can learn from New York, Chicago. There is a huge amount we can learn from other growing U.S. cities, but in most cases I find outside the U.S. much more progressive in the United States. I spend a lot of time in South America, as much as I can, and Medellin, Colombia, Curitiba in Brazil, Singapore, Sydney, Adelaide, Chiang Mai, I spent a lot of time there. Monterrey, Mexico is going nuts. These are cities that are growing, as well as a lot of U.S. cities. So here's just quick pictures. Go to Singapore. They don't have traffic congestions. They have electronic road pricing. And if you're going downtown on a Sunday afternoon, it's free. And if you're going downtown at rush hour on a Monday morning, it's $7. It changes by the minute. Nobody slows down. You can go 60 miles an hour under these things, and the roads don't need any toll gates or anything. You put these big things above, and of course the cars have all got text tags. It works. It works. They don't have traffic jams there. Bogota, here's people who take their buses seriously. I believe that Transmilenio was really the beginning of a lot of the big metro rapid systems. And those suckers are flying through the heart of the city, and then Mexico City picked it up later, and they're equally serious about their buses, just because buses have a lot more flexibility. One thing there's a thing called bus rapid transit, and that means a fixed guideway for the bus for at least part of the way. When I dug into it, when I look at the Federal Transit Administration website and go through all their white papers, this is called a study, like that one, March 2009, Quantifying the Importance of Image and Perception to Bus Rapid Transit. If you read this, I can email it to you, look at that one. They basically in there say the people that are writing the checks from the federal government for transit commitments, so they say, it's awful. All these cities in America want to do rail. It doesn't work that well. They should be doing bus rapid transit. Yet according to one study, no city in the U.S. has done serious bus rapid transit. The most serious is Ottawa, Canada. It's close to us. Well, I wrote this. I mean, everything I show you, I write. This is not just long distance study. These guys are regular street buses with special wheel systems, I think developed by the Germans, Siemens or maybe Daimler did this. Anyway, these guys are running 70 miles an hour down this track or whatever, and they cover the core part where everybody, so it would be like Mopac from 6th Street to the Arboretum. But when they get to the end, either end, the downtown end or the suburban end, they get off and they go wherever the new factory is. They go wherever the new housing development is. And downtown, they put a new convention center. Well, let's make that route. They maintain a high degree of flexibility, while in the core difficult part, they zoom. I mean, it's so cool and so far ahead of anything discussed and talked about in Austin. It's going to upset some of my buddies. I wrote it. 10,000 people an hour. I think it's very unlikely this would make any sense for Austin. I'm just saying, these people, because how many of you have been to Medellin? Medellin is maybe the most exciting city in the Western Hemisphere. It is just kicking butt and taking names. Amazing city, progressive, all kinds of cool stuff, including interesting transit. Well, this gets all the poor people out of the favelas down into their work in a fourth the time of the old system at a fraction the cost, and now it's become the #1 tourist thing to do. I mean, that never stops. It's very cool. And it's good for them, and probably doesn't need it here, because they hop over mountains and rivers, and of course the gondola system doesn't care about those. I'm just saying, try stuff, do something different. So my closing thoughts, I've mentored here, and I deal with thousands of startup entrepreneurs all over the world. If the city of Austin took 1/20th of the energy we put into how to get another nickel out of Facebook, or how to move another coupon online. I'm not making fun of those things. I love entrepreneurship, I love innovation, but we put all this energy into a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's not really going to change a lot of people's lives. If we put 5% of that energy into figuring out our transportation problems, we would be way ahead of the world, and we would not be talking about New York City. And my last thing, crazy idea, all these books here. There's a classic Hoover example. $95 book I got a month ago. I hadn't opened yet. It was in the stack. This is the textbook about X Prizes. And there's also a McKinsey report you can get, what's it called? Who won or who finished first. Anyway, something like $250 million going into, getting people on the moon and all that. And so I would just throw out, if Austin really wanted to be a leadership innovation city, for change, that to put together, with money from IBM or AT&T, now, a prize for growth city transportation issue. If you study these X Prizes, even though I haven't cracked the book, I've already done a lot of online research, you got to really plan them right, you got to set very clear goals, and then you put out, hey, whoever solves this the best gets $2 million or whatever it is. And there's a rising interest, in fact, both the government and think tanks, McKinsey, saying we need to do more of these competitions. And they go back through history. Longitude and latitude was all done through competition the British government sponsored. Well, longitude, right? Because they couldn't figure out how to get around the world, and they had a contest. So it ain't new. And because we share problems with Medellin, we share problems with Phoenix, we share problems with Dallas and Houston. And we ought to be able to be innovative and take a leadership role. And I think that covers all the, I don't take any more slides. Nope, that's it. So maybe questions or whatever, I'm open. Here, thank you for your time. Sure, yes.
So Mr. Hoover,
Gary.
If there is need for an X Prize, that can facilitate that conversation. I'm already in conversation with people about a innovation X Prize.
Oh, really?
If there's anybody in here who'd like to continue that conversation,
Yeah, cool. Yes, sir.
So I do appreciate your passion, but I totally agree that innovation in transportation is absolutely needed. The final examples that you showed really highlighted, though, that these are solutions that are put together in combination with a network of a whole bunch of different transportation options.
Yes, I agree.
The pricing is great, but they've also, since 1987, built more than 100 miles of rail as a part of their.
Oh, no, I agree. Yep, and they also tax cars.
So it's really about doing, and your initial outlays too also said that this was about a system, which is what the first.
Yes.
So it seems to me that there's not actually a lot of conflict between what you're saying and what he's saying, except for the fact that you don't like this.
I've tried because I love trains. I went up and rode DART in Dallas when we voted on this thing in the year 2000. I just cannot believe that fixed rail serves a useful purpose in this city.
They said that in Houston, and their first line carries more passengers than every light rail line in the United States, except for Boston's Green Line.
I would want it to
10 years old.
Yeah, and Houston is a great case of an integrated system. They are one of the few cities that appears to have
decreasing commute to work time in recent years, but it's a combination. I mean, if you look at transit ridership in Austin, it hasn't grown. People got on that new train, but they left the buses because so there's a lot of issues.
Houston bus ridership has dropped 20%, while that train ridership has grown.
And net, they're down, though. Net, they're down. People are riding less in Houston when you combine trains and buses. But no, I absolutely agree. An integrated system, and yes, absolutely. What I don't believe in is a huge expense and non-adaptive rail, just urban rail for Austin. So any rail, the last one, this one, and I don't say that about high-speed intercity rail, which is a whole different issue, which I might or might not. You know, I want to study the numbers. Sure. Yeah, go.
So on the Austin X Prize question.
Yeah, just a crazy idea.
Yeah, crazy idea. The biggest one being probably the Space X Prize. Would that be for a system? Would that be for a
that's what I'm saying. It takes a lot of work because you have the kind of thing that would be ideal would be, okay, any team in the country that can reduce the number of cars on MOPAC at 845 by the most percent or something. I mean, you have to have a firm, because you land on the moon, you get your $2 million. So, and it's tough. It's not easy to figure that out.
And the follow-up part of that is there's already a plan that's being proposed and can get things done. There is action and the time and all that. If you were to do an X Prize or some, shall we say, the third choice, what do you think the time frame is to get that packaged and ready to go?
I haven't studied enough depth, but it'd take years. I mean, it'd be long after the November election. I mean, to develop the prize, to raise the capital, and figure it out. No, I'll study it, but I would think if you started today, 2 to 3 years from now, you'd announce what the deal is. But other people have done it. I looked at other models. Yeah.
Is there models for talking about a little bit more car systems and that kind of thing, and more sprawl?
Yeah, no, none of these do, but we've been through those several times before. I'm not sure it's hard to say how they play into it. I mean, if I think about everybody lives around me out towards Gripping, they're there for the kids' schools. And they have enough elasticity, the gas prices aren't going to really affect most of them. And they're always, they've all moved in from California and New York and stuff. Lower taxes, bigger house, and better schools. Most of the growth in the city is going to be out at the edges, so yes, it will sprawl more and more, and that has been going on for centuries. No, absolutely, sure. No, things can change, and hey, come on, gas prices go up, then Carma and Right Scout are going to be living in the big houses. Buy all those houses from the Austin Veterans guys. Another question? Anything? And hey, you got my email address. And again, I want to see this be the greatest city on earth. And what I'm seeing is going the opposite direction. We're really innovative and really think about things that not everybody else is doing. And I don't want this city to be the next Silicon Valley or the next Portland. It's certainly not next New York City, because it's never going to be even funny. And I appreciate your time and attention.
One more question.
Yeah, oh, sure, sorry. Yes.
So you mentioned a bunch of cities that you've gone to and trialed their transit systems. One city that I have some experience with, I lived there for 5 years, that area is Denver. And they are doing a pretty aggressive both light and commuter rail system throughout the entire Front Range area. What are your thoughts on what bearing that has on maybe what Austin could do, and what are the differences that make that more successful, which it is, versus what we're seeing here?
Each city, I haven't gone into depth in all of them, and I scanned Denver and Seattle and Dallas, and I went up road large. So I don't have detailed answers. Jim, you know anything about the Denver system?
Well, it's in the same range as all the rest, and from the big picture, public transit in the United States has reduced for 50 years in terms of percentage of people riding it. In the 4 Texas cities, and Denver's not unlike them, but in the 4 Texas cities, there's less public transit ridership today than there was before the first train was introduced into public transit ridership.
Is that percentage wise or?
No, that's actual ridership.
So as a percentage, way down.
And so we need to really think about what we're doing. People are making free choices for their lifestyle and for their quality of life to go away from public transit. And we're trying to pour billions into increasing public transit ridership, but we're not succeeding. And we can look all around us and it's not succeeding. Denver is down. The only city that's a little bit up in actual is Portland, but it's way down in percentage.
So, okay.
Sure.
Well, thanks, Gary. I really appreciate it.
I have my computer.
Well, I was gonna, since we have a little more time left, I was gonna give each of y'all some time to specifically talk direct, give a short rebuttal to each other. That way, they're good. Because I saw that you're against the rail proposal, but can you go into more specifics of what exactly about this proposal, other than it being just rail?
No, that's my only objection.
Oh, so
is that it's a fixed route. It can't be changed later. It takes wealth from one group of people and gives it to another, and serves a very limited share of people for a huge expense, whereas with a tenth that money, with ride sharing and carpooling and all the cool stuff, we could make a lot more progress. So basically, it's bad value, and it's serious money. And I don't care if half of it comes from the feds. It's still coming from us, So yeah, that's my only objection.
Thanks. I'd like to give time to John Michael to discuss his proposal.
Sure, I'll just be brief. And I gotta hand it to Gary. It's rare that I get matched in energy and intensity when we're talking about something as boring as transportation. So I appreciate your passion. But just a couple things I heard that I'd just like to say a few words about. What I heard from Gary, and again, very logical, rational. He's obviously done a lot of personal, experiential research on this and read a lot. But he mentioned some things that I heard. We don't need a fixed routes. It's not a fixed city. He talked about density and what kind of densities we're seeing now, what kind of densities we're seeing in the future, its relation to rail ridership. Then we talked about cost, which is obviously very important. Specifically talked about BRT, bus rapid transit, and he talked about some other solutions that have been deployed in other situations. And, other solutions are right. Remember, it's just a tool to address a certain need. So let me address each one of those real quick. Fixed route for a fixed city. How many of you realistically think that at any point in the future, Austin's downtown central business district, the Capitol complex, the medical school that we're just now building, the University of Texas campus, how many of y'all think those are ever going to move? This is a fixed city. There are pieces of this city that are fixed, and they're never going to move. And they generate tremendous travel demand now and in the future. This is not something, we better not build a rail line here because downtown may move someday. The Capitol may move someday. The chances of that happening are very, very slim. Now, he is right. There are pieces or parts of this community that probably will change. We hope that they change around the periphery. And buses may very well be a much better flexible solution for the future. And in many cases, that's what we have proposed to do. We have put rail and proposed to put rail where we know the demand is now and where we know the demand will be in the future. It's not going anywhere. I think rail, especially in a central city like Austin that's well established, which has a huge concentration compared to other cities of concentrated employment and destinations in its central city. Rail is, as a fixed rail solution, is the right investment in that kind of environment. Density. Unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of growth in areas outside of the central city. In many cases, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. As long as we continue to invest in infrastructure that promotes sprawl, we're probably going to get it. And so shouldn't we invest in infrastructure that creates the opportunity for not sprawling? So that's one piece of it. But in addition, density. We look at where people live. Let me tell you something. Where people live in residential density is critically important for transit, but not nearly as important. Well, it's nearly as important, but what's more important is employment density. Employment density drives ridership. Austin, Texas is one of the highest concentrations of employment density in its downtown business district. If you don't believe me, Google it. We're right up there with Washington, D.C., which has the federal district, which concentrates all the jobs there. Not to say there aren't jobs in Reston and other places, not to say there aren't jobs in Round Rock and other places, but it's D.C., New Orleans, and I believe Austin. We have somewhere between 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 of all the jobs in the entire region are in the few zip codes around us right here. This employment density in Central Austin is not a phenomenon that's going to go away, and we do need to serve it with high capacity fixed investments. And this gets to another issue, cost. $1.38 billion is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But if you're comparing it to what the cost of a bus-based system is, there's a couple of things you need to look at. It's not just about the one-time capital cost. Those of you who know about investing in capital assets know it's about the total life cycle cost. When you invest in a rail system, you talk about New York's rail system. There's pieces that have been around for a couple of hundred years. They've paid that off generations ago. When we do a fixed rail investment here in Central Austin, guess what? It's going to be around long after we're done. So it's not as if you build it and you're paying for that upfront capital expense forever. You have to look at the total life cycle cost. When you buy a bus system or you try to do a bus system, you have to replace those vehicles like every 10 to 12 years. You're constantly having to invest in new capital to keep that system going. Total life cycle cost, and if you look at especially per passenger over time, rail systems will beat a bus system. And then in addition, we talked about the difference between capital and operations and maintenance. It's a question of capacity. And in the Central Corridor study, we looked very closely. Our last 2 alternatives was true BRT. That means just like what we see, a lot of the same attributes as what's in the Transmillennial, dedicated right-of-way, very fast, very frequent. The cost difference upfront, capital cost of a BRT, a true BRT system that does the same thing as this urban rail proposal, was not that much different. There's still a tremendous amount of infrastructure you're going to have to build to have a true BRT system. So the delta in the capital cost is not as much as you would think, and you have to look at the total life cycle cost. We would be replacing those vehicles quite a bit more often than we'd be replacing rail vehicles and stations. But this is the key point, the most important point. If you look at the travel demand now and look at the travel demand in the future, and keep in mind that we're not trying to build one BRT line or one rail line. We need a system of lines, and this would be the first piece, the trunk of that system. A BRT service, when we open it up on first day, could hardly be expanded and have the capacity for other lines. We couldn't build a system off this first project. If we open up that BRT service, by our estimation, it'd open up at about 85% of capacity on the corridor, which means we could not expand and make extensions to serve more parts of the city off of this line. Urban rail will give us the capacity. Remember what I said when I talked initially. It's not just about this one project. It's about the demand in the future. And we have to be building towards a system, not one little project at a time, but keep our eye on the ball, the real project, which is the system. So total life cycle costs, not that much difference in capital costs if you're going to do BRT correctly, as if it were going to emulate an urban rail system. And then the capacity issue, which is probably the most important issue. We did do that analysis, and we can go into depth. It's all on our website if you want to look at it. But BRT is just not the best solution on that corridor. And finally, other solutions. As I mentioned multiple times, everything that he mentioned as other solutions, going to a 4-day work week, more carpooling, all of the apps, it all needs to happen too. Go to the Chamber of Commerce's website, look at their report, look at what the Texas Transportation Institute did for them. They'll tell you too, we gotta have it all. One little thing I just have to mention, all of those other solutions, they're innovative, they're privately funded primarily, but to say they're not supported by tax dollars is crazy. All of the ride sharing, bicycling, those all operate on right-of-ways that were paid for and built with tax dollars. Everything is subsidized by taxes, everything. Transit, driving, flying, bicycling, we pay for it all in part. And that's fine, because we need it all. So it's not a question of either or. This is subsidized, this is not subsidized. It's about providing a range of choices that meet people's transportation needs now and in the future. And I could go on, but I'm gonna stop there.
Thanks, John. So let's do maybe two Q&A questions, and then we'll close off the formal discussion, have more of a networking style event. And then just before, we have to leave by 9, so just keep that in mind.
Can I make one little rebuttal?
Sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously, with a lot of what you say. The one thing I would say is on the fixed routes, is for a fixed route to work, it has to have both a fixed origin and a fixed destination. And transit systems are most successful when you have a path that you have lots of people want to follow, like from one end of Houston Airport to another, or Lower Manhattan to Upper Manhattan. And so you have, downtown Austin isn't going to move. But in the 30 years I've been here, Highland Mall went from being the center of Austin's commercial activity to being a dangerous dead place. I had signed a letter of intent to spend, it's like $150,000 a month renting, leasing part of Highland Mall for my museum project. So I really say that, and one way, that's going to come back under ACC. You have to have two ends. Downtown staying where it is doesn't help. The other thing is, yeah, there are numbers floating around that 20-some% of the Austin people work downtown. That's not apples to apples with other cities, central business districts, the real core downtown. It's under 10% of Austin employment, and I don't think that's out of line with other cities. What happens here is you have huge employment with the state capitol and the university, which are not technically the downtown. It gets complex. But, and then you begin to creep higher and look like we have more jobs downtown. But the vast majority of people in the Austin area don't. It isn't 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 that work all over. The biggest single employers are not downtown. None of them are. So, I think they're, and on the funding, yes, the streets are paid for by taxes, but we pay for them and everything. And when Joseph does his thing and Carma do their thing, there isn't an additional $4,000 out for a family to finance it. And I think it'll affect a lot more people and help things more.
So two questions.
For voters that are interested in more and safer transportation options late at night, including third shift workers, will we be ensured that the project will run till at least 2 a.m. in its initial stages?
What we've identified as a service profile, so we can do estimates of cost for O&M, things like that. And I believe currently, and Scott Gross, who came in a little bit later, he's on the project team. I believe that the current service profile has us till midnight, Monday through Friday, or is it two Monday through Friday?
Well, right now we assume 17 hours a day during the weekdays, 20 hours a day on the weekends. And that's 10-minute peak period service, so that's 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening, and then 15 minutes for the rest of that time.
So what time does it start to stop?
Right now, that's to be determined. Right now, we're budgeting for 17 hours a day during the week, 20 hours
So what
a
would be
week.
typical?
So if you started at 6 a.m.
So 6 a.m. or 5:30 to 20 hours later. It's kind of late.
1:30.
But again,
2:30. I mean, but that's what we're budgeting right now. There's lots that we can do to tweak that. We can go to 12-minute peak period service, for instance. That could account for longer operations during the evenings. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in this right now. The project is still, it's not fully defined. We've got a real good handle on it, and we'll continue to refine it. We want more input on it as we continue to develop it. We've kind of taken it to a point to now where we think you all are ready to act on it.
So will it be further defined by November? Time to go?
I mean,
Why don't we trust that there would be any night service when the current light rail doesn't have appropriate service for instance? I feel like as a voter, I would not vote for anything because you are not doing it correctly.
Right, but it's, if I could respond, I mean, as John Michael said, I mean, the current rail service that we have is commuter service. It was designed to serve commuters primarily. And the city has been funding Friday night and Saturday afternoon and evening service in order to meet some of those needs. We have other issues with that line. It's also a freight line. So there's windows where we can't operate passenger service. The city is not really nearly the level of a partner in commuter rail as it intends to be with urban rail. And we're bringing capital that allows Capital Metro to devote more funding for operations so that we can run. This is a completely different service than we have in Austin currently and have ever seen in Austin.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so we're going to close off the Q&A session and go into more networking part of the meeting. But if you do have any ideas that you want us to cover for the next meetings, let me know, or Nicole know. I think one issue that we talked about was open data and how it relates to the transit system. I think this group would be great for that. But anything else, just let us know, and we'll try to, put it into the programming. But otherwise, thanks again to Austin B-Cycle. Thanks again to all the speakers, and thanks to y'all for attending this. Thanks.